Okay, I've been working for Nick for 2 years, so I work with Joseph, who's my husband, and he does all the riding and I'm on the ground the whole time. So I've learned a whole different relationship with my horses since I've been on the ground. I notice things that I probably wouldn't have noticed before because I was too busy thinking about getting on the back of them and getting them ridden. I've definitely been able to learn, particularly through Carlos, specific areas that are uncomfortable for them, so that when he comes the next time I can say, this mare's sore on her right hip, or this one needs help with her left shoulder, or whatever, because he's taught me a little bit about how and why they don't move in a certain direction, or why they would suddenly be uncomfortable in a certain direction, and why that would correspond to a particular area of their body. And I've been able to pay more attention to that. We've learned an awful lot about how we can alleviate those problems, and there's definitely a pattern to it. They all do the same sport under the same player, so they're going to have certain things that they're more likely to be injured in. And as we've gone along and we've changed the saddle slightly, so we've been able to leave those problems behind on all of the horses, not just one or two of them. One of the first things I think we notice after Carlos has been is that the horses are easier to play, easier to ride. It's a lot less pressure for Nick to be in the right place on a horse that's not very comfortable and doesn't really want to go into a small space or get pushed into something they're not happy with. When the horses have been adjusted and they're comfortable, you can see that they are easier. It's easier for them, it's easier for Nick. They're quicker, they respond better, they recover a lot faster because they haven't started off sore and then, played sore. They don't fatigue as quickly. But I think the most important thing for me has been that we have often gone to a stronger bridle up to the bit. Numerous times we've done this, and yet there's been so many occasions in the last winter, or the last year probably, that we've had Carlos come and adjust a horse, change nothing else, and the horse has gone completely different the next time it's gone on the field. So one of the best things that I've taken from this is that when horses are strong, they're very often uncomfortable and they're trying to move away from something. These are well-schooled high-goal ponies. These aren't, brutes out there. They know their job. So for them to be being strong and running away from the rider, it's been a very obvious sign that this is discomfort and not bad behavior at all. So that's been a really big lesson for us, definitely. We've changed bridles in the past and ignored the fact that the horse was uncomfortable. So for us to be able to keep them in the same bridle, the same tack, everything the same, as far as the steering and the brakes are concerned, you take away that discomfort and the horses are going so much better. So that for me has been huge, because we've gone to a stronger bridle, had Carlos, and then gone all the way back to a lesser bridle than we were using in the first place. With the horses that were sore in their saddles, it really snowballed to a point where the horses were not playing well anymore, because it may have started as a little area that was pinching or uncomfortable, and they compensate by moving in a certain way, and the end result was that the horses it got worse and worse and worse. When they're uncomfortable and sore and their muscles are tired, you can barely flick them off with a soft brush. So that's been one of the things that both Joe and I have said. As the weeks have gone between visits with Carlos, we've been said to Nick, look, I can hardly brush this one, or I can't even hose it off because of the pressure of the water. And that will change in a half-an-hour visit with Carlos. So once they're back to comfortable again, now that we have these new saddles, we don't regress. We don't keep going back to that point, which we had been before. Every game we would go back to that point and have to start from scratch, get Carlos back, have them readjusted. That's not happening anymore. In fact, more and more often I'll show Carlos a horse and he'll look at it and say, there's nothing for me to do today. That's absolutely with the new saddles, that they've been able to stay in alignment. And then, that helps as well, because if they do get bumped hard, very often they get bumped, but it's the saddle that pushes them out of line, and then they can't, there's nothing they can do about that then, they're stuck in that. Whereas with this saddle, it takes so much of the impact, and there's so much movement that they're able to, brace themselves and protect themselves a little better than they were before. So, that has an effect on them recovering and being less fatigued as well. Well, the first time we took only the new saddles, huge difference. They had recovered in 2 minutes. They were having to walk less. They acted the following day as though they hadn't even played. It was remarkable. I'd say recovery time was cut in half. And these horses, I know they're fit, but it's the end of the season. They've played a lot of polo. And Nick's out there doing it. You know, he's hard on them, hard on himself as well. But they are expected a lot of on the polo field. So I'm very used to them coming back tired, having given 100%. These guys are still giving 100%, but it's not taking 100% out of them. And that's been a huge thing for the horses. We have a horse called Me that would be a prime example of that. The saddles, the best fit that we could find off the shelf before these saddles were ever made would still make Me uncomfortable. She would get very sore on her withers. It became a huge problem at one point. In fact, took her out of the game for about 6 weeks. And she was on antibiotics and treatment for that. There was nothing that we could fit saddle pad wise, something we could rig up ourselves, bits of sheepskin, bits of sponge. There was nothing that seemed to alleviate this particular problem. Miss Mara has a high wither and a huge back end. She's slightly downhill. All of the pressure would end up in her shoulder and her wither. Me got to the point where she didn't want to lead on exercise. You could hardly brush her. She was off her feed. She was really not going well on the field. Again, another talented horse that was obviously not at her full potential. And each and every time that Carlos came, it would take him 45 minutes to an hour easily. She needed to have acupuncture. He would put the little clips that he puts on there so that there was some electric going through it as well. And she would have a couple of days where there was a marked improvement. And then we would have to put the saddle back on and we would go all the way back to the original point. And we were tearing our hair out. There was absolutely no way that we could get past this. Now, at the far end of the season, having been in these new saddles for the last month of this season particularly, there are times when Carlos looks at me and says, "She's fine, I don't need to work on her today." So to have gone from over an hour's worth of treatment on a regular basis, every single time we played this horse, Carlos had to come and put her back together again, to a point where we are happy for her to go weeks before we even call him. And then when we do call him, it's really more of a, can you check that she's still okay, that we're not missing something? And to have him be able to hear him say, she's fine. And we know that, you know, by the way she's performing, she got best playing pony in one of these saddles. So the difference is enormous. This is a mare that had 6 weeks off, was lethargic, didn't want to do anything, was on medicines and treatments for injuries that were all related to a saddle. This horse is 14 years of age and capable of being a best playing pony on a field full of very good horses, and was out of work and on treatment because the saddle didn't fit. So she really was the catalyst for all of this and has been a huge education for all of us. Nothing needed to change for me. We just needed to get out of the way and let her play polo. And the old saddle was stopping her from doing that. And the minute we alleviated that pressure, she went out and did what she could have done all the way along. She has improved in every area. She's easier to deal with. She's got a fantastic appetite. She gets turned out. She rolls. She runs around. She played 60 plus chukkers this season. And last year she played for probably 6 weeks, and that was it. So it's been an enormous difference. And this is an older horse. This is not a horse that suddenly became educated and went out and did her job. She could always do it. She just was too uncomfortable to do it before. And now she's great. And her recovery time is just like any other horse. She doesn't have any special needs anymore. She's just one of the ponies, and she's very reliable, always does her job, and got turned out sound, and so she's on vacation and there's just nothing wrong, and that's been great.